My parents blamed me for my golden brother's crime, called me a bad influence, and sent me away at 16. 13 years later, they walked into my law office begging me to save him from prison again. I'm currently 29 years old, but this story starts when I was 16 and my younger brother Jackson was 14. First, let's understand my family dynamic. Growing up, Jackson was the golden child from day one. I'm talking the kid who could literally do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I was the responsible one, the one who was expected to set the example, help around the house, and basically be a built-in free babysitter. When Jackson forgot to do his homework, it was because he was tired from sports practice. When I forgot to do mine, I was being irresponsible and needed to manage my time better. When Jackson got a C on a test, my parents would comfort him and tell him he tried his best. When I got a B, I'd get a lecture about not applying myself. You get the picture. Classic golden child versus scapegoat situation. The thing is, I didn't really mind being the responsible one. I actually took pride in it. I made honor roll every semester. I had a part-time job at the local grocery store. I stayed out of trouble. Meanwhile, Jackson was getting into increasingly stupid stuff. Nothing major at first, just typical teenage rebellion stuff. Skipping class, talking back to teachers, hanging out with kids who were clearly bad news. I tried warning my parents about Jackson's friends. There was this one kid named Brandon who was 17 and already had a juvenile record for shoplifting. Another one, Kevin, had been suspended twice for fighting. These were not good influences, and anyone with half a brain could see that Jackson was starting to act differently around them, more secretive, more aggressive, more willing to break rules. But every time I said something to my parents, they'd dismiss it. I was being jealous. I was being overprotective. I needed to let Jackson have friends and make his own choices. My mom actually told me once that I should be more like Jackson and learn to relax and have fun instead of being so uptight all the time. Yeah, Mom, I'll get right on that. Things escalated during the summer before my junior year. Jackson had just finished 8th grade and was about to start high school. Brandon, Kevin, and a couple of other kids from their group started hanging out at our house more often. My parents loved it because they thought Jackson was being social and making friends. I thought it was a disaster waiting to happen. One night in July, I was working the closing shift at the grocery store. I got home around 10:30 p.m. and the house was quiet. My parents were watching TV in the living room, and I figured Jackson was in his room. I went upstairs, did my usual routine, and went to bed around midnight. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to voices downstairs. Not loud voices, but that urgent whispering that means something is very wrong. I got up and crept to my bedroom door, opening it just enough to hear what was going on. My dad was on the phone with someone, and I heard him say, "Yes, this is about Jackson. We'll be right there." Then there was frantic movement, doors opening and closing, and my parents rushed out of the house. I looked out my window and watched them speed away in my dad's car. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just sat in my room door, cracked open, waiting. They came home around 5 a.m. I heard my mom crying, my dad's angry voice, and then Jackson. My brother was sobbing like I'd never heard before. Not the kind of crying you do when you're sad, but the kind you do when you're terrified. I stayed in my room. Something told me to keep quiet, to not get involved until I knew what had happened. Around 7 a.m., my dad knocked on my door and told me to get dressed and come downstairs, family meeting. This is where everything went sideways. Turns out Jackson and his brilliant friends had decided to break into the high school, not to steal anything major. They weren't that smart. They wanted to vandalize the principal's office because Brandon had some beef with the guy. They broke a window to get in, spray painted some walls, knocked over file cabinets, and were apparently trying to access the principal's computer when the security company's alarm went off. The police caught all 4 of them still in the building. Jackson had a can of spray paint in his hand when they found him. Open and shut case, caught red-handed. My parents sat me down in the living room. Jackson was there too, looking like death. His eyes were red from crying and he kept his head down the whole time. My dad was pacing and my mom looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Then my dad said something that made my blood run cold. "We need to talk about how you influenced Jackson to do this." I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. My parents proceeded to explain to me how this was somehow my fault. According to them, I had created a negative environment in the house with my constant criticism of Jackson's friends. I had made Jackson feel like he needed to prove himself. I'd been a bad role model by working too much and not spending enough time with my brother. My complaints about his friends had pushed Jackson to act out because he felt I didn't support him. The mental gymnastics required to reach this conclusion were Olympic-level impressive. I tried to defend myself. I pointed out that I had actively warned them about this exact situation. I had told them Brandon was trouble. I had said Jackson needed better boundaries, but they weren't hearing it. In their minds, they needed someone to blame who wasn't their precious golden child. And I was the convenient scapegoat. My mom actually said, and I'm quoting directly here, "If you had been a better big brother, Jackson would never have felt the need to seek approval from those boys." Jackson just sat there and said nothing. Didn't defend me, didn't correct them, nothing. He let them blame me for something I had literally tried to prevent. That's when they dropped the real bomb. I was being sent to live with my aunt and uncle in another state, according to my parents. I needed to be removed from the situation so Jackson could focus on getting his life back together without my negative influence. They'd already talked to my aunt, who had reluctantly agreed to take me in for as long as necessary. I had a week to pack my stuff. They were pulling me out of my school, away from my job, away from everything I knew. And the kicker, they were taking my phone, no contact with my friends, no social media, nothing. They said I needed to focus on reflecting on my role in this situation and learning to be a better family member. I was 16 years old, being exiled from my own family for something I not only didn't do, but had actively tried to prevent. The worst part, Jackson's punishment was house arrest and community service. He got to stay home with our parents, who would support him through this difficult time. I got banishment. The drive to my aunt and uncle's place was 6 hours. My dad drove and we didn't speak the entire time. When we got there, he handed my aunt a folder with my school records and medical information, gave me one of those awkward side hugs, and told me to think about what you've done. My Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert were good people, but they were clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. They had a small 3-bedroom house in rural Pennsylvania, and they gave me the guest room. They were both in their 50s, had grown kids of their own who were already out of the house and weren't really prepared to have a teenager living with them. The first few weeks were rough. No phone meant no connection to my old life. My aunt and uncle had a landline, but my parents had specifically told them not to let me use it except for emergencies. I couldn't call my friends, couldn't check in with my former boss at the grocery store, couldn't do anything. It was like being cut off from the world. I tried to email my friends from my aunt's computer once, but she'd been instructed to monitor my internet usage. My parents didn't want me spreading my version of events to people back home, so I was cut off not just physically, but digitally too. In the age of social media and constant connection, I was completely isolated. The worst part was not knowing what people were being told. Were my friends wondering why I disappeared? Were my parents telling everyone I'd been sent away because I was a problem? Was anyone back home defending me? Or did everyone just accept my parents' version of events? School started in late August and I enrolled at the local high school as a junior. I knew exactly no one. I was the weird new kid who showed up 3 weeks into the school year with no social media presence and no phone. Making friends was basically impossible. I ate lunch alone, did my homework alone, and spent most of my free time in my room. The other kids didn't know what to make of me. When they asked where I'd moved from, I'd give vague answers about family stuff. When they asked for my social media handles, I'd say I wasn't on social media. In 2012, that was like saying you didn't believe in electricity. They'd look at me like I was some kind of alien. Teachers were confused, too. Here was this kid with excellent academic records from his previous school, clearly smart and capable, but completely socially isolated. I caught my guidance counselor watching me eat lunch alone more than once, probably wondering if he should intervene. But I wasn't being bullied. I was just alone. There's no intervention for that. But here's the thing about being isolated like that. It gives you a lot of time to think, and I had a lot to think about. I thought about how my parents had treated me my entire life, how nothing I did was ever good enough, while Jackson got praised for the bare minimum, how they'd blame me for his mistakes instead of holding him accountable, how they'd thrown me away like trash when it was convenient for their narrative. And I got angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that makes you do stupid things, the cold, calculated kind of anger that makes you focused. I decided that if they wanted to throw me away, fine, but I was going to succeed in spite of them, not because of them. I threw myself into school. I was already a good student, but I became obsessive about it. I studied every night until my aunt had to tell me to turn off my light and go to sleep. I joined the debate team because it didn't require me to have a social circle, and it would look good on college applications. I volunteered at the local library on weekends for the same reason. My aunt and uncle noticed the change. Uncle Robert pulled me aside about 2 months in and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, just trying to stay busy. He looked at me with this sad expression and said, "You know this situation isn't fair to you, right?" It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged that. I nearly cried right there in his garage. He continued, "Your parents are handling this all wrong, but you're doing the right thing, focusing on school and your future. Don't let their mistakes define yours." That conversation changed something in me. I realized I didn't have to accept my parents' version of reality. I could create my own path, and their opinion of me didn't matter. My aunt would call my parents once a week to give them updates on how I was doing. I'd hear her on the phone. "He's doing well in school. On a roll again. Yes, he's behaving himself. No, he hasn't asked about coming home." That last part was important because after about 3 months, I realized I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to go back to a house where I was blamed for everything and appreciated for nothing. So when my aunt would relay messages from my parents asking when I wanted to visit, I'd tell her I was too busy with school. Christmas that first year was weird. My parents sent a package with some generic gifts, a sweater that was the wrong size, a gift card to a restaurant that didn't exist in Pennsylvania, and a card that said, "Hope you're learning and growing." No phone call, no video chat, nothing personal, just a package that screamed we did the minimum required to pretend we care. I sent nothing back. Months turned into a year and then another. My parents would occasionally call my aunt to ask about me, but they never asked to speak to me directly. I figured they were fine with the arrangement. I was out of sight, out of mind, and they could focus all their attention on fixing Jackson's life. Meanwhile, I was crushing it academically. I finished junior year with a 4.0 GPA. Senior year, I was taking every AP class available and scoring high on all the tests. I applied to colleges, writing my essay about overcoming adversity and learning self-reliance. I didn't mention my parents or Jackson by name, but anyone who read between the lines could figure out what had happened. I got accepted to a good state university with a partial scholarship. Not a full ride, but combined with student loans and a work-study program, I could make it work. When I told my aunt and uncle, they were thrilled. They offered to help with what the scholarship didn't cover, but I declined. I'd been saving every dollar I could from my part-time job at the library, and I was determined to do this on my own. My parents found out I'd been accepted to college when my aunt told them. My mom called the house, and my aunt handed me the phone. It was the first conversation I'd had with my mother in almost 2 years. "Congratulations on college," she said, her voice stiff. "Your father and I are very proud." I almost laughed. Proud of what the kid they'd abandoned, the scapegoat they'd blamed for their golden child's mistakes. "Thanks," I said, keeping my voice neutral. There was a long pause. Then she said, "You know, you're welcome to come home for a visit before you start school." "I'm good," I replied. "I've got a lot to prepare." Another pause. "Jackson's doing much better. He's back on track. We thought you'd want to know." What I wanted to say was, "I don't care." I wanted to say, "You blamed me for his mistakes and threw me away." I wanted to say, "You chose him over me and you don't get to act like a proud parent now." Instead, I said, "That's great. I'm glad he's doing well. I have to go now." I hung up before she could respond. I left for college that fall and never looked back. I majored in pre-law with a minor in political science. I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college to minimize my loan, one at the campus library, another at a local coffee shop near campus. Between classes, studying and work, I had maybe 2 hours of free time per day, but I didn't mind. Staying busy meant less time to think about everything that had happened. I had a few friends, went on a few dates, had a semi-normal college experience. My roommate freshman year was a guy named Luis who was studying engineering. We got along fine, mainly because we were both too busy to get into each other's business. He'd be up at 2 a.m. working on problem sets while I'd be reading case law. We'd occasionally grab food together or watch a game on weekends, but mostly we just coexisted in that easy way college roommates do. Sophomore year, I moved into an apartment with 3 other guys. It was cheaper than the dorms, and I could cook my own meals instead of paying for a meal plan. I learned to make decent food on a tight budget. Lots of rice, beans, chicken, pasta. Nothing fancy, but it was fuel. I dated a girl named Rebecca for most of junior year. She was sweet, studying to be a teacher. We met in a political science class and started studying together. Eventually, studying turned into coffee dates, which turned into actual dates. She met Aunt Julie once when she came to visit for Parents' Weekend. Julie loved her, said she was good for me. Rebecca and I broke up when she realized I was never going to introduce her to my parents. She couldn't understand why I didn't talk to my family. I tried explaining it once, the whole story about being blamed and sent away, but she came from one of those close functional families where everyone loves each other and problems get talked through. She couldn't wrap her head around the idea of parents who would do what mine did. She suggested I work on forgiving them, maybe try family counseling. When I refused, she said I was holding on to anger that was only hurting me. We broke up about 2 weeks later. No hard feelings, just 2 people who couldn't understand each other's fundamental worldview. My focus was always on the long game, law school. I studied my behind off and made the dean's list every semester. I applied to law schools my senior year and got accepted to a good program, not Harvard or Yale, but a solid school with a strong reputation. More loans, more work study, more grinding. But I was used to it by now. Hard work was my comfort zone. Law school was brutal. First year almost broke me with the workload and competition. The Socratic method, where professors randomly call on students to answer complex legal questions in front of the entire class, was designed to be intimidating. And it worked. I watched classmates drop out to switch to part-time programs or have complete breakdowns in the library at 2 a.m. But I remembered sitting in that guest room in Pennsylvania, angry and isolated, and I used that memory as fuel. Every time I wanted to quit, and there were many times I thought about my parents dismissing me, and it pushed me harder. When I was exhausted from pulling all-nighters to finish case briefs, I thought about that family meeting where they blamed me for Jackson's arrest. When I was stressed about exams, I remembered my mom's words about me being a bad influence. First year, I worked as a research assistant for one of my professors, helping compile case law for an article she was writing. Second year, I joined the criminal law clinic, where law students work on actual cases under supervision. I represented clients who couldn't afford private attorneys, mostly juveniles accused of minor crimes. That's when I realized this was what I wanted to do with my career. Third year, I was editor of the Law Review, which meant even longer hours and less sleep. But I also secured a summer internship at a public defender office, which gave me real courtroom experience. I watched seasoned attorneys fight for clients that society had written off. I saw kids who'd made stupid mistakes get second chances because someone believed in them enough to fight for them in court. I graduated in the top 10% of my class, passed the bar exam on my first try, which only about 60% of test takers accomplish, got hired by a small criminal defense firm that specialized in juvenile cases. The irony wasn't lost on me. The kid who got blamed for his brother's juvenile crime was now defending juveniles accused of crimes. My first year as an actual attorney was a learning curve. I lost cases I thought I'd win, and won cases I thought were hopeless. But I learned fast. I learned how to read judges, how to cross-examine witnesses, how to find the holes in a prosecutor's case. I learned that sometimes the best outcome isn't an acquittal. It's getting your client into a treatment program instead of jail, or getting charges reduced so they don't have a felony on their record for the rest of their lives. I worked 60-hour weeks minimum. Some weeks it was closer to 80, but I loved it. Every kid I helped felt like a small victory against the system that had failed me. Every time I got a judge to see my client as a person and not just a case number, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. By year 3, I had a reputation. Other attorneys started referring clients to me. Judges knew my name. I'd built something real from absolutely nothing. During all this time, college law school, studying for the bar, starting my career, my parents reached out maybe a dozen times total. Birthday cards with generic messages, the occasional email asking how school was going. Once my dad called to tell me my grandmother had passed away, but we never had real conversations. They never apologized. They never acknowledged what they'd done. And I never reached out to them either. Why would I? They'd made their choice years ago. I heard through my aunt, who I stayed in close contact with, that Jackson had graduated high school, gone to community college for a year, dropped out, and was now working retail management. He'd never left our hometown. My parents still treated him like he could do no wrong, apparently. Good for him, I guess. We hadn't spoken since the day I left their house. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I'm 29 now. 3 years into my career as a defense attorney, I've built up a decent reputation in juvenile criminal defense. I win most of my cases, and the ones I don't win usually end with reduced sentences. I'm not rich by any means, but I'm doing well. I have my own apartment, I can pay my bills, and I've almost paid off my student loans. One Tuesday morning, I'm at my desk reviewing case files when my secretary tells me I have a walk-in consultation. The name on the intake form was Janet and David Stevens, my parents' names, but it didn't register at first because Stevens is a common last name. I told her to send them in, and when my office door opened and I looked up from my paperwork, I found myself staring at my mother and father. 13 years older, a lot grayer, but definitely them. The look of shock on their faces was priceless. My mom actually gasped. My dad's mouth literally fell open. They stood frozen in the doorway like they'd seen a ghost. For me, the moment was surreal. I'd imagined running into them hundreds of times over the years. In my imagination, I'd always had the perfect thing to say, the perfect way to make them understand what they'd done to me. But now that the moment was actually here, I found myself feeling strangely calm, detached almost. They looked older. Obviously, my mom's hair had gone mostly gray, and she'd gained some weight. My dad had aged harder, deeper lines around his eyes. Thinner hair, that worn-down look that comes from years of stress. They were dressed like they were going to church or a funeral. My dad in a button-down and slacks, my mom in a conservative dress, formal clothes for a serious meeting. And I just sat there, pen in hand, looking at them like they were any other potential clients. "Mr. and Mrs. Stevens," I said, my voice perfectly professional. "Please have a seat." They stood frozen in the doorway. My mom found her voice first. "Danny, is that really you, Danny?" They hadn't called me that since I was a kid. I'd been going by Daniel professionally for years. Hearing that old nickname felt like someone dragging nails across a chalkboard. "It's Daniel now," I corrected, keeping my tone neutral. "And yes, it's me. You're here for a consultation." They stumbled into the chairs across from my desk like they'd forgotten how legs work. My dad kept staring at me like I was a ghost. My mom had tears in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from shock or some other emotion. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Who knows? The office felt too small suddenly. My professional space. The one place I felt completely in control now contained the two people who'd made me feel most powerless. But I had the desk between us, my law degree on the wall behind me, my name on the door. This was my territory now, not theirs. "We had no idea," my mom stammered. "We've been looking for a defense attorney for weeks, and someone recommended this firm. And we just made the appointment, and we didn't know it would be you." Her voice trailed off. She was looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time, taking in the professional clothes, the organized desk, the framed law degree from a school they didn't even know I'd attended. "Interesting," I said, still keeping my tone neutral and professional. "Let's talk about why you need a defense attorney." They exchanged glances. Finally, my dad cleared his throat and said the words I'd been waiting 13 years to hear. It's Jackson. He's been arrested. I raised my eyebrows, pretending to be surprised. I see. What are the charges? My mom burst into tears, real ones this time, ugly crying that she tried to muffle with the tissue. My dad looked like he'd aged another 10 years right there in my office. Embezzlement, he said quietly, from his employer, about $45,000 over the course of 2 years. I nodded, making notes on my legal pad. That's a serious charge. Was he caught with evidence, or is this accusatory? They have evidence, my dad admitted. Bank records, forged invoices, the whole thing. His lawyer says he's looking at 2 to 5 years in prison if convicted. His lawyer, I asked. So he already has representation, a public defender. My mom sobbed. But they don't care about him. They just want him to take a plea deal. We need someone who will actually fight for him. Someone who understands he's a good person who made mistakes. I wrote down more notes, mainly to give myself time to process this absolute insanity. Jackson had been arrested for a serious crime. My parents were desperate enough to seek help from a private attorney, and somehow through sheer cosmic justice they'd ended up in my office. I see, I said finally. And you want to hire me to defend your son Jackson against embezzlement charges? Yes, my dad said quickly. We know this is awkward given our history, but you're his brother, and someone told us you're one of the best juvenile defense attorneys in the area. And we thought I don't handle adult cases, I interrupted. My specialty is juvenile criminal defense. Your son is, 27 now? That's outside my area of expertise. The hope that had briefly appeared in my mom's eyes died. Oh, we didn't realize. However, I continued. I do know several excellent criminal defense attorneys who handle white-collar crimes. I'd be happy to give you some referrals. I pulled out a legal pad and started writing down names and phone numbers of attorneys I knew and respected. Good lawyers who would give Jackson a fair shot if he was willing to work with them. As I wrote, my mom finally said what I'd been waiting to hear. Daniel, we're so sorry. We had no idea you'd become an attorney. We're so proud of you. I looked up from my writing. 13 years of silence, of being treated like I didn't exist, of them choosing Jackson over me again and again, and now when they needed something, suddenly they were proud. With all due respect, Mrs. Stevens, I said, my voice still professional, but with an edge to it now. You've had 13 years to be proud of me. You had 13 years to apologize, to reach out, to acknowledge that what you did to me was wrong. You chose not to. My dad shifted uncomfortably. We thought you needed space. We thought you wanted to be on your own. No, I said firmly. You blamed me for Jackson's mistakes and threw me away because it was easier than holding your golden child accountable. And now that he's in trouble again, you show up at my office asking for help. The irony is almost poetic. We made mistakes, my mom whispered. We know that now. We should have handled things differently back then. But please, he's still your brother. I finished writing the referrals and slid the paper across my desk. These are 3 excellent attorneys. Any of them would be a good fit for Jackson's case. I'll make a note in their files that you're coming on my recommendation. That's it, my dad asked. You're not going to. You're just giving us referrals. What exactly did you expect, I asked. That I drop everything to save the brother who sat silently while you blamed me for his crimes? The brother who never once reached out in 13 years? The parents who chose him over me at every opportunity? We're family, my mom said desperately. Family, I repeated, tasting the word. You know what I learned while I was living with Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you. It's about who believes in you when things are hard. They were more family to me in 1 year than you were in 16. The silence in my office was heavy. Outside I could hear phones ringing and people talking normal office sound. But in here, it felt like time had stopped. Finally, I stood up, signaling that the consultation was over. I genuinely hope Jackson gets a good attorney and a fair outcome. Nobody deserves to have their life destroyed over mistakes, but I'm not that attorney, and I'm not going to pretend we're a family who can just move past 13 years of you treating me like I didn't exist. My parents stood slowly. My mom was still crying. My dad looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. As they reached the door, my mom turned back one more time. For what it's worth, we really are proud of you. Look at everything you've accomplished. I accomplished it without you, I replied. That's the part you need to understand. I survived being thrown away by my family at 16. I put myself through college and law school. I built this career from nothing with no help from you. So yeah, I'm proud of myself too, but you don't get credit for that. They left without another word. I sat back down at my desk and stared at the closed door for a long time. Part of me felt guilty. They looked so desperate, so broken, but the bigger part of me felt vindicated. They'd come looking for the son they'd thrown away, hoping he'd save the son they'd protected, and learned that the throwaway son had become someone they needed. My secretary knocked and poked her head in. You okay? That seemed intense. Yeah, I said, surprising myself by smiling. I'm actually really okay. Were those the parents you told me about once, the ones who sent you away? I nodded. They didn't recognize me until they walked into my office. They'd been looking for a good defense attorney for their other son and ended up here. She whistled low. That's some karma right there. Yeah, I agreed, some karma. I heard through the grapevine, one of the attorneys I'd referred them to, that Jackson did end up taking a plea deal. He got 18 months in minimum security and 5 years probation. Not a great outcome, but better than it could have been. The attorney told me my parents had asked about me, wanted to know if there was any way to reconnect. I told him to tell them I appreciated the thought. But no. About a month after that office visit, I got a letter in the mail, my mother's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 4 pages long. She apologized for everything, for blaming me for sending me away, for not staying in contact, for choosing Jackson over me repeatedly. She explained that they'd been in denial about Jackson's issues, that they'd been terrible parents to me, that they'd realized too late how badly they'd messed up. She said she understood if I never wanted to see them again, but that she wanted me to know how sorry they were. She included photos, pictures of me at graduation, at my first job, things that Aunt Julie must have sent them over the years. She'd kept them in an album, apparently. I read the letter twice, then put it in my desk drawer. Didn't respond, haven't responded, don't plan to. 3 weeks after that letter arrived, my secretary buzzed me. Your mother is online too. Should I tell her you're in a meeting? I stared at the blinking light on my phone for a solid 30 seconds. Then I picked up. Daniel Stevens, I said, keeping it professional. Daniel, it's Mom. Her voice was shaky. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something about Jackson. He took the plea deal. I already know. One of the attorneys I referred you to mentioned it. It's not that. She paused. He wrote you a letter, asked me to mail it to you. I have your office address from the business card you gave us. Don't send it, I said. He's really struggling with this. Daniel, he wants to apologize for everything. For not defending you back then, for I don't care what he wants to apologize for. I cut her off. You need to understand something. I'm not holding on to anger. I'm not waiting for apologies. I've moved on. My life is good. You're not part of it, and Jackson isn't part of it. That's not punishment. That's just reality. She was quiet for a moment. Then we destroyed our relationship with you. I understand that now, but he's still your brother. No, I said calmly. He's a guy I used to know who shares my DNA. That's it. I hope his time in prison helps him figure his life out. But I'm not his support system, and I'm not yours. Can we at least meet for coffee sometime just to talk? No, goodbye, Mrs. Stevens. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking a little, but I felt okay. Clearer, actually. That was 8 months ago. They haven't tried contacting me since. Jackson started his sentence in February. I heard through my attorney contact that he's doing fine in minimum security. My parents visit him every week, apparently. Good for them. That's what parents are supposed to do, show up for their kids. Meanwhile, I got promoted to senior associate at my firm last month. Bigger office, better cases, significant raise. I'm working on a case right now that could set a precedent for juvenile sentencing reform in our state. It's the kind of case that could define a career. Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert drove 8 hours to take me out for a celebration dinner when I got promoted. Uncle Robert gave me a pen, one of those expensive ones lawyers use with my name engraved on it. For signing all those important legal documents, he said, grinning. They're the ones who were there when I graduated college. They're the ones who helped me move into my first apartment. They're the ones who call me every Sunday just to check in. That's what family looks like. And it has nothing to do with blood. Last week, I was in court representing a 16-year-old kid who'd been caught with his older brother's illegal substances. The prosecutor wanted to charge him as an adult. The kid swore he didn't know what was in the bag his brother asked him to hold. His parents believed him. I believed him too. I got the charges reduced to a misdemeanor with probation and mandatory counseling. The kid gets to finish high school without a felony record. His parents hugged me in the hallway outside the courtroom, crying with relief. That case was personal for me. Different circumstances, same dynamic, younger kid getting blamed for the older one's mess. Except this kid had parents who fought for him instead of throwing him away. I made sure to tell them that. Keep believing in him, I said. Keep showing up. That's what matters. The mom looked at me and said, "You're an amazing attorney. Your parents must be so proud." I smiled. The people who matter are proud. That's enough. So that's where things stand. My parents know where I am but can't reach me. Jackson's serving his time. I'm building a career helping kids who actually need someone in their corner. And Aunt Julie just texted me asking what I want for my birthday dinner next month. I won Reddit. Not because I got revenge or made them suffer. I won because I built a life so good that their absence doesn't hurt anymore. I'm not the kid they threw away. I'm the man they'll never get to know. And honestly, I'm completely fine with that.